riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back with you at the Grizzly Jig Show Spring 2024. I got two of the legends of crappie fishing next to me, and I really got with them, and I said, man, I'm thinking of pre-spawn, and I want to talk about some of the mistakes that we have seen crappie fishermen do in the springtime in really the pre-spawn area. And I want you to kind of think back and, like I said, look at some of the mistakes that you think is very common for whether it's spider rigging or single poling or casting bobbers, or what are some of the things that just pop up to your head there, Steve, that you see some guys really doing wrong, and if they changed up a little bit, they would catch a lot more fish?
Well, to me, it's not really their technique; it's their locations. What I see, you know, you may be trying to catch spawning fish, you're not there yet.
Yeah.
You know, just because that weather's 75 degrees outside, you know, it all, to me, it depends on the hours of the sunlight, you know. And to me, those fish, you know, they might not pull up there. You know, your males are going to be there first, you know. And on the pre-spawn, those big females are going to lay back just a little bit further, and people's fishing the banks trying to catch these big fish, and they're not there, you know.
I know, Jeff, you've got a lot of experience in this neck of the woods as well. But some of the other mistakes that people could be making in the springtime that, you know, if they just adjusted a little bit.
I think one of the worst things I see is they'll go out and they'll fish and they'll look at their daytime water temperatures.
Right.
They'll not go to dinner. Water temperature's up where fish could be spawning, but early in the morning it's not. And like Steve said, your fishermen are jumping the gun. They're trying to go on the banks and catch the big fish where the water temperature's not getting to where it needs to be till late afternoon, and your fish are not going to go up till it sustains that. You know, they need to wait till they're warm nights and keep the water temperature warm, and then go to the bank. And that's what I see. Most people, like Steve said, location, not going too shallow too soon.
Mm-hmm. You know, spider rigging, and both you guys are pretty well at doing that, I would say. What is the mistakes as far as setups goes, or what would be, even in your mind, a really good springtime pre-spawn setup to spider rig with?
You know, I've watched people out there spider rigging, and you know, typically we've been taught to use 8 poles.
Right.
You know, that's your setup. There's people, you know, that's a good fisherman, and there's a lot of fishermen that can't handle 8 poles. They're out there trying to catch fish, and 90% of their time on the water is retying rigs and messing poles
Right.
up. So, you know, it's hey, don't overload your butt, you know, kind of lean back, you know, 4 poles, 5 poles, you know. I've got now, I don't even fish 8 poles anymore, spider rigging.
Yeah.
I fish 6. And a lot of times that's too many, you know. They just try to do too much at one time, is what it is.
What about like your Caps and Coleman setup that you're kind of known for? Kind of
Yeah.
describe that setup whenever you're setting it up, whether What does that mean? A Capson Coleman setup for spider? What is that?
That's all it is. It's a good set of pole holders. You know, it don't matter really which kind you use. You know, just get you a good brand. And our setup is usually 6 or 8 poles. You know, I said I go back to 6 poles. You know, and basically the BGJP, the B&M poles, is my setup on spider rigging, which I don't call it spider rigging. I call it slow trolling. Mm-hmm. I don't like the term spider rigging.
What?
No.
You just like insects or what?
It's just, it's I don't know. It's something that I don't like. It's slow trolling because it is. It's real slow. It's the speed that you just barely know that your boat's moving. And that double hook minnow rig, the Capson Coleman.
The double hook setup?
It's just, it starts out at quarter, 3/8, it's ½ ounce, 3/4, up to 1 ounce,
Why do people choose different sizes, or why do they need to use different sizes?
The depth of water, because that small rig is basically a short rig, and as you go up in the rig, to 1 ounce, that rig is longer and it's made for deeper water, And the bigger weights, if you want to, if the fish are on a fast bite, you can go faster with the bigger weights, My favorite one's 3/8, It'll get me where I need to be.
Slow trolling, Jeff. What do you? We can call it spider rigging if you like spider rigging.
Fine.
I mean, we won't say that to Steve. But
I don't like spiders, but that's okay.
All right, you still like spider rigging, though.
Yeah, right.
The jig sizes. I mean, that jig head, but actually the weight. What do you see that, and how do you judge what size weight you're going to use a day?
Well, it's according, like Steve said, the depth of water. Most people start out in the early spring catching fish on quarter or ounce jigs, and they'll move up into real shallow water. And most of the time, a crappie's going to run from that quarter ounce jig into shallow water because, like Steve, you can't present that jig slow enough to them. The way it falls, like going over structure and it falls back down, you want it to fall real slow. But another thing that, talking about mistakes, most people use too big a line. In the springtime, you don't have any algae in the water. Your water's real clear. First thing your fish is going to do is see your line and spook from it.
All right, what ideally is your setup as far as line goes?
If I'm going to fish for pre-spawn fish, I'm usually going to use 6-pound tests, sometimes 4. It's according to how clear the water is. And the biggest jig I'm going to use or weight on my rig is going to be an 1/8 ounce.
Oh, that's very light.
Yeah, and I will go to 32nd or 64th when your fish are moving on. Like I said, the shallower the water go, the lightest you can go.
So you start out light, and then if you need to, you're going to move up heavier and heavier.
If your wind gets up and the jig the wind's blowing your line and they can't sit still, you have to go bigger sometimes, but use the smallest one you can use.
I think that's one thing that's probably not discussed enough, or we haven't discussed enough on the Crappie Connection is wind factors because springtime's going to have some windy days, and you're out there spider rigging. And the mistake people might be making when they're spider rigging in the wind, what would it be, Steve, in your mind?
Going with the wind.
Going with the wind.
Yeah. I always keep my boat pointed into the wind, because if you point that boat in the wind, if it's really windy, stay at home. You're not going to have a good time
Right.
unless you have to be out there on the water. Go on the good days, But keep that nose into the wind because you've got control of that boat, with that trolling motor. And these motors they got now, if you get in trouble, you got to retire a rig. Hey, they got spot lock.
All right.
You hit it and go back there and tie your hook up, eat your bologna sandwich, drink a Coca-Cola, and go back to fishing. Just don't fight it.
Don't fight it.
Don't fight it. No. A lot of times, I go down the wind, and I pull some type of weight. We've got power poles and brakes and everything else these days. Mm-hmm. I'm still old school. I still drag that chain.
What about your chain setup whenever you are slow trolling?
It's a 5/8 chain. I got 2 pieces on each side of the boat to keep the boat straight, and they're about 8 foot long.
That'll slow that joker down.
It'll slow it down. If it doesn't slow it down fast enough, I just add a little more line on each side.
Let's talk about that, and I like that.
No clasp on it.
This guy knows. He knows how to slow down these boats in these winds.
Yep.
And you're talking about if you're drifting too fast, you're going to want to do what with that 8-foot chain?
I'm going to let a little more line out so it'll drag a little further back. It's got more drag on the bottom.
So that slows down that boat. Do you have it like tied off in increments as far as that rope goes, or is it just all about feel?
Yeah, most time, you kind of figure out where it needs to be. If it's, I want that boat to move when I touch that trolling motor. Just barely touch it to barely move those chains. If it's not adjusted, it'll keep you where you at. Pretty simple.
It sounds very simple. You just done it so much. Yeah. I mean, don't it?
Yeah.
But we're thinking about people, and you're getting out there, and you're drifting too fast. So you've come up, and through the years, noticing putting out the chains is going to slow down that boat.
Yeah.
To keep it slower.
It's old school, It's $50-$60 worth of chains versus $5,000 or $6,000 worth of brakes.
Yeah.
I can't justify that. Especially for somebody just going fishing.
Yeah. But chains is easy.
Yeah.
A lot of guys have them back of the truck and they're pulling out of the mud and use them to catch crappie
if
too.
you're tournament fishing, no problem. Get the brakes, get everything you need on there, if you're tournament fishing. But the everyday fisherman, you can do without all that. We did before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And caught a lot of fish.
A lot of fish.
Jeff, are you using any kind of chain system whenever you did it, or?
I do use the chain. Like he said, when you fish into the wind, you don't have your line marked or anything. You just get the feel for it. And he'll say this too. I've had times where I'd have to go back there and reset mine 4 or 5 times to get it where, like he said, when you're moving slow and you want to stop, but you want to be able to keep your trolling motor real light to be able to pull you. You don't want to have your trolling motor on 90% and dragging the chains, because all you're doing is running your fish off. So you've really got to, and him and Ronnie, they're the best I ever seen at it. I try to be, and I do pretty good.
Yeah.
But you just got to get the feel for it and figure out if a fish want to bait at 0.2 or 0.3, get it where when you hit your trolling motor maybe on 25%, you can pull that fast and then stop.
I think it's like you said. I mean, if you're not being able to move, you might have to bring in that chain, just the opposite side of things.
Yeah.
I know that, spider rigging is still here to stay, and I am so glad it is, because live scope's not necessarily necessary, and I don't think it's brought to the attention nowadays. Somebody getting in the sport and they go out and they say, man, that live scope looks awesome, and they realize this just isn't for me. Instead of getting out of the sport or the hobby of crappie fishing, spider rigging is something that, like Steve said just a second ago, he caught plenty of fish way before live sonar.
Yeah. Well, live sonar, no matter which one you use, you can still use it slow trolling, and it helps out a lot because, if you're fishing heavy structure like Roofwood, hey, you see all those stumps coming toward those poles, and you've got the opportunity to move that boat to one side or the other, especially when you have customers in the boat, because you don't want them hung up all the time. So I kind of move that boat a little bit, where it comes right between them poles. So.
I know one of the major things that I've seen through the years spider rigging with clients and people that's just getting into it, I want you both to tell me about setting the hook. It sounds very minute, and what I have, and the guy that I took fishing Wednesday this week, he just lifted up the pole very slightly. And I was like, what are you doing? And I was like, you got to set the hook. And he's like, well, I've always heard the term paper mouth.
Yeah. It's all in the risk. I mean, you just pop him and you just keep that tension on.
Keep the tension.
Ask Jeff how many customers it's.
Oh yeah.
You can't tell.
Well, nowadays with B&M poles or any kind of pole, they make these poles, especially the B&M, that they can take. That fish can take that abuse of setting the hook hard and not tear it out of them. We used to use poles that were like broomsticks.
Right.
And if you did set the hook hard, you was going to tear out the fish. But with these new B&M poles and the sensitivity of them, when you set the hook, it takes care of that shock for you. So, yeah, you need to bear down and make sure you get the hook in them. Because a big fish, a lot of times, if you get them in the hard part, if you just pick up, just as we do, that fish going to open his mouth and he's going to swim off. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
I'd much rather have somebody in my boat that actually sets a hook than somebody that just wants to pick the pole up.
Right.
And how I adjust if somebody's oversetting the hook, is I loosen my drag a little bit.
Right. Yeah, and that'll take care of it too, good reels. But you're just talking about the spider rigging. When I get back home Monday, I'll spider rig every day till I can't. And I know a certain time of the year you have to change over.
Yeah.
But I'll take the B&M poles and spider rig clean to the end of April, and my customers can handle that better. And they can adapt to it quicker than teaching them how to fish with one pole.
Yeah, and literally, I mean, I have guys that call me and they say, "Oh, we're just going to live scope." And I'm like, "No, we're going to do whatever we need to catch the fish."
Right, exactly.
And it might be long lining, it might be spider rigging and shooting docks or whatever. But I think being versatile, especially coming into the sport, live scope and live sonar is awesome. I mean, it totally it is awesome. But also these other techniques are awesome too.
Oh, yes.
And I think the mistake for me during pre-spawn comes to mind right now is being just stuck on one technique. You know, just sitting here and saying, well, I'm going to just do this and I'm going to catch fish. Well, that's not how crappie fishing really works.
No, you got to be open-minded.
You got to be open-minded.
Yeah.
And you got to be versatile.
Yeah, if you got a friend that's catching fish, you better pay attention to what he's doing.
Yeah, don't be stubborn.
Yeah.
No, that's the first thing. Don't think you know it all, because you can get taught a lesson quick.
These fish are humble.
That's right.
Anybody in this
That's
building
right.
right now, and there's a couple 100 people out there.
Right.
I don't know of anybody that hadn't never been humbled on the waterway. It's just the nature of the beast. But I think that my biggest mistake that I see people do is not being versatile and not changing up enough. I know used to, especially when I fish tournaments a lot, and you go around and you meet different people at boat ramps as they're taking in and out, and you say, well, how was the day? And they say, man, we didn't catch anything. And I'm like, man, first off, that gives me a good clue of not what I want to do. You know, they didn't catch fish. I'm not going to do what those guys just did. But just don't go out there and try one thing. And I know my boat, and Lord help it, at the end of the day, you can tell if I'm struggling because there are going to be different things all over the boat. Yeah. There's going to be some quarter-ounce weights, and it might be some 1-ounce weights. It might be some tube jigs. It might be an 80-bit jig. But eventually my goal is to figure out things so we can catch fish.
Well, you know, with this forward-facing sonar, everybody says they can't see fish. You know, it's all in your settings. You know,
Right.
I've been on a real foot, and I was this last fall, and had a little young cat, and he was having problems. You know, he done caught a few fish, but not many. And I said, well, I ought to put my boat on spotlight, and I'll jump in your boat. Well, I jump in his boat, and I look at his screen. I said, how did you ever catch the first fish? Mm-hmm. You know, got his screen straightened out, got him all good and clear, perfect, just like I fished. Got back in my boat, and the next day he sent me a picture of a cooler full of fish. And to this day, that boy is on fire now. He's all B&M now. Mm-hmm. If he listens to this podcast, he knows who I'm talking about.
Well, good. I hope he does listen to this podcast.
But it's you know.
I've gotten somebody's boat, I think a year or two ago. I can't recall exactly when. And he's like, man, I can see fish on my screen, but I can never see my baits.
Yep.
Guess what happened? He had a transducer looking backwards.
I've seen that.
And you're like,
Yep.
dude, let's switch it around. And he's like, man, this is amazing. I can see
He
it
says,
now.
only thing I can see is my motor.
Yeah. It's like, I can see the fish, I can see everything, but I can never find my bait. And I'm like, well, that don't make any sense. And sure enough, the transducer was backwards. But, you know, I think details, and both of you guys have proven through your history of crappie fishing how important details can be when it comes to, regardless, pre-spawn, spawning, post-spawn, winter, whatever. But how do you figure out a detail? And you know what I mean, because both of you are experts at it. But what are some of the details that can really make a difference?
Like, was just what Jeff said a while ago. I'm going to talk about this again. He talked about them warm nights. Mm-hmm. When you get those warm nights, like he was talking about, where that temperature is steady and doesn't fall, that water is going to stay at that temperature or above during the daytime, see? And those small details like that is what triggers those fish to spawn.
You're thinking, all right,
Right.
these warm nights, these fish are going to be starting to go.
That's like you're in your house with a heater on, you walk outside, it's cold, and all of a sudden it's warm outside, and the temperature's about the same, you're feeling good, sun's shining, everything's just right. You change seasons, don't you? You get a different feeling. That's what them fish are doing.
Yeah, I'm not going to wear this hoodie in July.
They
Outside.
just laid up out there right now getting fat. That's all they do. So,
What is your favorite month to crappie fish? I need to ask that more to people.
my favorite month is November and December. It's 2 months.
I can respect that.
They will
Mine
bite.
is probably February and March,
Yep.
because I'll have to duck hunt during the time they're fishing.
He
Or
don't
it
get
would be
to, he don't get to go.
You're the guy sending him coolers of fish.
Right,
then.
right.
Well,
Pictures. Look at this.
I did a lot
How
more
was the
duck
duck
hunting this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should be fishing.
Yeah.
Today, actually, light winds and everything else, it's a crappie fisherman's dream, I think, today. But definitely thank you guys for everything you've done with the sport of crappie fishing through the years. B&M poles, great guys as well. You've been on there. Well, you got poles after this guy. So how long you been doing this tournament thing?
Right at 40 years.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Jeff, how
I
long?
ain't that old yet.
All right.
Come on,
I've
Jeff.
been doing it 20 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of experience. Definitely look up those guys. I know both of them's out there. But I appreciate it. And make sure you hit that subscribe button. Turn your notifications on. We got a lot of good podcasts this spring from Grizzly Jig. Thank you, everybody at Grizzly Jig, for making this happen and doing a wonderful show for the crappie fishing industry. And this is how we're going to help grow and maintain this sport. Till next time, we got Brad Chappell here.
Steve Coleman.
Jeff Riddle.
Holla.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel